Hi folks, the Japanese are very good at taking ideas from around the world and developing them and turning them into something very special. So around about 1000 AD or thereabouts, the Japanese imported the art of making steel from China. And for about 800 over 800 years, they refined that process by making a steel called tamahagani, which was a high carbon steel, which was made. It was a bloom steel. It's made by taking iron sand, and that's sand that's high in iron, and carbon in the form of charcoal, and burning it in a as a sort of a furnace over about 3 days, and you keep feeding the furnace with sand and charcoal at appropriate levels, and after about 3 days of entirely without sleep, you've got to tend this solidly for 3 hours, for 3 days. You then break it open, and at the bottom of the furnace you have a bloom steel called tamahagani, and that steel is then graded, broken into small pieces, and then forge welded together and folded many times to produce a type of steel, this type of steel, which is many layered. And you can actually see this isn't the best quality knife in the world. You can see here that there are actually some sort of splits in the steel. They also developed the idea of hardening the steel and using a hard steel core and a softer steel for the spine. And then when they came to do the final hardening of the knife, they would cover the blade in clay, and then remove some of the clay in order that the cutting edge of the blade would be much harder than the back of the blade, and that gave it this what's known as a ham-on line. Also is where the curve comes. When you quench that knife, they quenched them in water. It's very fast cooling. Most knives are quenched in oil. And warm oil at that, but you quench that in cold water, you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to crack the blade, or if you know what you're doing, you're going to put a curve into the blade. This being a Meiji period piece, it was really, I suppose, looking back to the sort of Koto period of swords before 1600, from the sort of warring period, rather than the later Shinto and Shinshinto blades. But this is probably Gindaito as opposed to Shinto. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make about all of this is that they developed this style of making knives, and part of that, this is genuinely a Tanto, is the way that the blades are sharpened, and they're not sharpened by grinding something to an edge and then adding a micro bevel like. This is a Japanese knife, but it has a bevel at the edge. This doesn't. This goes just straight to a zero edge, or an apple seed. So the blade is, it's thick, and it's a convex edge that comes right down to the edge. Now, funnily enough, this is not actually very sharp. That's probably because of the period it's for. It's more of a decorative piece. It is a proper Japanese-made tamahagani steel blade, but it was possibly made for the export market for gaijin barbarians to buy and take home as souvenirs, rather than for a samurai to carry it. And it's not really. It's probably not even decorative enough for it to be a lady's dagger, but it's a nice piece. I like it. But anyway, if you come forward and we look at where we are in what is literally the state of the art in knife making today, we have these. I'm not very dexterous with the knives, but this is a Rockstead. Now, of course, as I've said before, you can't be a Japanese knife maker without calling your knife a Higo or a Higo. I know others as well, actually, that are don't quite fit into the Japanese realm, but where people want their knives to look like the Japanese, they call them a Higo. And you can see on the back of here it says it's a Higo. It's a Higo. There's 4 characters just say Higo, and then 07. Well, I say there's 4 characters say Higo, and then there's a Roman numeral 2, and then 073. With the 2 it's a Higo Mark II, and it's serial number 073. Now, this is made in titanium, with a titanium handle. The Higo one had aluminium handles. But the important thing is in these knives is the blade. Now, this is filthy. And why is it filthy? Because I've just taken it out of my pocket, because I carry this knife as an everyday user when I'm not going out to the house. This is YXP7 steel, which is a tool steel, high-speed tool steel, and it's polished to an edge in the exact same way as a proper katana. It's also a proper Tanto. I should point out that the word Tanto is a dagger. We've come to think of Tanto points as looking like a samurai sword point, but Tantos very rarely have that sort of point. That's what I call an American Tanto, because it's a sort of a corruption of the term, or a misuse of the term. But these ones are actually polished. These are made, they're not made like a Tanto because it's a high-speed tool steel, but they're polished like a Tanto. They're polished to an edge. There is no micro bevel on this. If you look at it closely, it looks as though there is, because it goes shiny at the end. And the reason for that is that this blade is DLC coated, as of DLC coating, but not like any other DLC coating you'll ever see, because this is very fine and very, very polished. It's also very hard. DLC diamond-like coating is because it's a very hard carbon coating. But it comes down to by polishing it, eventually you get to a point where you've polished through the coating and you get to that silver edge. But this is sharpened exactly the same way as a traditional Japanese knife is done. It is a hugely intensive process to make that work. And as a result, these knives are hideously expensive. But they are some of the best knives ever. This particular one is hardened to very nearly 65 Rockwell, and they say it shouldn't ever need sharpened, and if they do, they'll regrind it and sharpen it for you. Now, I've used it as a regular user over a year, and I can tell you it's just still very, very sharp. What you do have to do with it is to strop it, and they suggest that you make a particular type of strop, which is a block of wood with denim jeans, so it's an old pair of jeans of mine, and metal polish. And then you're not stropping it with Jeweler's Rouge or anything abrasive, you're stropping it with metal polish, so you're polishing the blade sharp. Now, I say that is to very nearly 65 Rockwell. You can see it's used, it's got batter and scuff. There is a long video on these knives, but they also do a steel called ZDP ZDP 189, and that's what this one is. This is a titanium nitride coated blade, but it has it is slightly different in the way that it's ground, in that you do have this what looks like a sort of secondary bevel, but it still comes to a zero edge. There's still no fine edge. Now this is hardened to very nearly 67 Rockwell. So again, I use this knife regularly, and so long as you keep it stropped, it copes very well. I have managed to get a couple of little scratches on it, which you might be able to see if I hold it up. I don't know if the reflection, they're so shiny, it's very difficult to see. But it really gets used regularly. It's one of these are two of my most used knives, and yet they hold up extremely well. They've never needed sharpened. I've had them both for, well, this one for well over a year and this one for about a year, and they just hold up. They're great knives, really, really good knives. A lot of people say they're too expensive to want to carry them, but I don't see the point in that. If you've paid a lot for a knife, I expect to get some value out of it and some use out of it. So this one's aluminium, by the way. It's called the Hizen. You can see the Hizen. This is an older pattern, hence the 613. But 613 is still, there's only 613 Hizens made up until around about this time last year. This was number 73. These are not high volume knives. They turn out very low volumes, very labour intensive to make, and hence the price of them. Now, much as I think these are very practical knives, very, very usable, they lock. So of course they're not UK legal to carry, and that's a crying shame. The Higo is inevitably a little bit on the big side. You're talking about a 3 3/4 inch blade with 3.5 inch cutting length, so that would always be too big to carry in the UK, and you can argue the pros and cons of that, but that's just the way it is, so there's no point in worrying about it here. The bigger issue is with this one, the Hizen. It's a 3 inch blade with a 2 7/8 inch cutting edge, so it's, it would be pretty much perfect as a UK sized carry knife, but of course it is a locking knife, and locking knives are ruled out by case law. Now, case law is just as important as statute. It could be changed. You could challenge it in court if you wanted to, but the consequences of losing could see you go to jail, and certainly see you with a criminal record. And I just don't see that as a reasonable risk to take in life. I won't be challenging it. Should somebody find themselves in that position and their challenge be successful, I would be very, very happy. But certainly, as I say, it's not something that I would like to risk. It's a crying shame, because these are just great knives. I mean, I particularly like this one, partly because I've got big hands, and so it kind of fits my hand better. But it just slices through things. And, that's what a knife is supposed to do. And this does it supremely. Better than any other knife I've got. And I have some other very nice knives. I've got, I've got this Polish Custom Knives M390. These are just different class. It's hard to get it over, really. I suppose they'd have to be in order to justify the cost, but if I could only keep one of my non-UK legal carry knives, it would be the Higo, and if I could only keep two, it would probably be the two of them. I love my Medford. I think it's fantastic. Great knife, very chunky and solid and whatever. But it'll just, and it's sharp, but it just doesn't slice like one of these. My Chris Reeves, fantastic knives, but they just don't have the class of these. Anyway, that's probably all I have to say about these at the moment. I could witter on about why these are fantastic knives forever, but these are very much the pinnacle of my Japanese collection and probably the pinnacle of my collection. I mean, these three are three of the pinnacle of my Japanese collection. I do have some katanas and some wakisashis, and I have one katana, an Amada Sadayoshi katana that is an exceptional, a really truly exceptional sword that my grandfather brought back from the war. He thought it was a munitions blade. It was one of they used to make them out of railway sleepers, and he thought it was one of those. What he didn't realise was it was made by one of the greatest sword masters of the Gendaito period, and the father of Amada Agetsugu, who died quite recently actually, who was a national living treasure. It came from a great sword dynasty, and one day I say I'll do a video on that, but it's just complicated and difficult to set up. It is the only blade I own that is more precious to me than these two. Anyway, that was a lot of wittering nonsense, wasn't it? If you like my wittering, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see some more wittering, or hear some more wittering, then please subscribe and remember to ring the bell. I'm not sure what else we're going to do next. I'm just working my way through the drawer, but there's plenty there to do. So, thank you very much for watching. Bye.